Hey everyone, just want to make a short video here on how to cut an access hole to access the fuel pump on a GMC. This is GMC Savana 1500 van, custom van, high top, Regency. I've seen some videos on cutting a hole in the express van, and the instructions I got there they worked out a little bit, but not well. The instructions they gave was to take a tape measure and measure from the back of the seat bracket there to 29 inches. And that's what I did, and right here is the 29 inches, which is obviously just a little too short. But also in the same video, I noticed the hump for the fuel inlet from outside that goes into the tank right there. I noticed that. I looked in the video, and as you can see here, the inlet and the fuel pump is off by about an inch or two. It's pretty close to center, but not exactly. And of course, this has the custom seats in it, which is another seat right here, the captain's type chairs. And in the express van, the seats are way back here. They're way out of the way. I had to remove the seat. Luckily, it's just a little lever that you use to remove the seat. But as you can see, the brackets I used were pretty much in the way. You can see here that I had to notch it to get it to clear. And what I found after cutting is that there's actually a bracket they put underneath. It's obvious when they did the conversion, they dropped the tank and they put this bracket in there to hold on the other side of the floor. So you've got the pretty thick metal bracket up here, you got the floor, and then you got the metal bracket on the bottom. And this bolt here is a carriage bolt, so there's no head to get a hold of on the back side. It's like a square right here on the back side that holds the bolt. But for anyone else wanting to do this access hole, that's kind of where it's at. As you can see here, the straight line. Let me get a tape measure out here where you can see if we go straight from that, it's off by probably 2 inches or so from the center of that. So if you're going to cut a hole, measure it from that back about 2 inches or so, and you should be right center of that fuel pump. And I guess the size of the hole doesn't really matter that much, since I'm going to I go out to a salvage yard and cut a floor piece out of another van and make a patch panel. And I'm going to make it, a lot of people want to make it to where it just goes around the edge there. Why do that when you can make it go all the way down here? You can put screws in it, screws here, a couple of screws here, some screws here, and you sealed it off. You may have to put a little sealant around the edges to keep leaks, keep any vapors or dust or anything from getting in. But as you can see, the insulation and stuff they got underneath it is actually pretty significant. That's a rubberized coating. It stops a lot of the noise and the heat from coming up. I have to admit it's pretty impressive how much material there is underneath this carpet here. But as you can see, pulling the pump out, see if I can keep from dumping gas everywhere. Yeah, come on out there. Getting that pump out of there. You see, I've got a light here. Oh, that one's dead. Okay, well, I guess can't really see it, but right there, there's a little black piece right here. That's the inlet from the fuel inlet. You can barely see it right there. I took my flashlight in to charge it last night and I forgot about that. So anyway, got a new, I'd been having problems with the vehicle. Drive a long distance. I drive from Dallas to San Antonio to work. It's about a 6-hour drive. And it would drive fine. It would have sometimes a little lack of power and a little bit of sputtering. And, you know, I was concerned it was the spider injector assembly because they're known for going out. Well, I replaced the spider injector assembly day before yesterday. And after I got it all replaced, it was actually pretty easy. I started up and it's still acting the same. I found that the spider injector assembly had already been converted from the old style to the multi-port, but I don't know how old it was. It may have been that the injectors were starting to fail. I was getting random cylinder misfires, and especially misfires on cylinder 5, which is pretty common for the injector assembly going out. That's the reason I changed it. Now I don't have to worry about it. Like I said, after I did that, it was still sputtering a little bit, and if you were sitting there idling, if you hit the accelerator by about halfway down, it would stumble a little bit, and then it would backfire some. I also sometimes get error codes for the upstream O2 sensor on bank 1, which is the driver's side. I've already replaced the two O2 sensors on bank 2, the passenger side, the upstream and downstream, but I hadn't replaced them on the bank 1. So I ordered those, and they're coming in tomorrow evening, and I'll put those on. And the fuel pump I ordered, and it's supposed to be in a couple of days, and I'll replace it. The reason I did that is I ran a fuel pressure test, which is pretty easy to do on these things. Get a fuel pressure gauge, and you're right here on the back side of the engine. This is the Schrader valve for doing the fuel pressure test. You just put it on there, and by what I understand, for it to even start, it has to have at least 50 psi. And according to everything else I've read, it says that fuel pressure minimum is 60 psi. And after I got it, the spider injector assembly replaced, and was able to start it, I had a fuel pressure gauge on there, and it was reading 30 psi. When I shut the key off, it would go up to 40, and then it's supposed to hold a certain amount of pressure for like 15 minutes before it finally starts to slowly go down. Well, it wasn't doing that. It was almost immediate that it would start dropping to near zero. So it's obvious to me that the fuel pump is going out. And this one says Delphi on it, but if you look at the wires, you can see where the wires have been spliced in, and that's only done aftermarket. All the aftermarket fuel pumps you get have this wire assembly, and you're supposed to splice it in. The new one I've got coming in has this wire assembly with it, and I don't know if I'll change it out or not depending on the wiring harness, but I had to wait and get a hole cut before I could order it, because apparently there's 3 different fuel pumps for these vans. If it's over 8,500 gross weight, then it'll have an accessory. This particular one here actually will be open, and it'll have a rubber line with a hose clamp on it and a plug on the other end of it. It's basically for running an accessory of some type. I'm assuming some type of conversion or a work van or something. 8,500 would have to be a 1-ton van. And then there's ones that have a single electrical connector, and then you have ones that have a dual. And this one obviously has 2 connectors. So you need to make sure which one it is before you order one. I'm not sure the reason of two of them, but I'm assuming one of them here is probably all the power for the fuel pump. And in this one, it says something about fuel pressure sensor, which is, I'm assuming is what this is. But instead of getting the one that I ordered, actually had is a complete assembly like this, rather than just getting the pump. Because I remember older GM vehicles especially are bad about the float starting to go bad, and they'll start reading funny. That's what that little black thing on the side is right there. That's the float that gives you your fuel level whenever things spring loaded. But it was bad about those shorting out and giving incorrect readings. And it wasn't that much more. It was like $60 some for just the pump, and then it was like $85 for the entire assembly. So it was worth it to me just to get the entire assembly so I could pop it in there. One thing I noticed when I took this out is there's supposed to be... Ooh, getting stuck, are we? Damn it. Sure as hell don't want that thing to come apart. Well, I'm going to have to get that rubber piece out of there now. Anyway, on the bottom of these, there's supposed to be a fuel strainer that they call a sock. Basically, it's just a little piece that kind of hangs out there that helps to strain all the particles, keep it from getting up in the pump and damaging the pump. Well, this particular one didn't have the strainer on the bottom of it. Even though it's a Delphi pump, which is basically GM pump. Whoever put it on their aftermarket didn't put the strainer on the bottom of it. And that could be part of the problem. It's sucked up debris or something and damaged the pump. But I noticed driving to or from San Antonio, when I drove back the other day, that was a problem I had. It was fine. The entire drive back, driving 80 miles an hour, it was fine. But once I got back within about 30 miles of my house here, which was about probably five and a half hours into the drive, I was slowing down to get off the freeway. I was going to hit the bank, do some other things. And as soon as I let off the accelerator, it died. And, of course, I pulled over and stopped, and trying to start it up, it acted like it was flooded, or it had a lack of fuel. You'd start it, and it would and eventually it would kick off, and it would sound fine running. And the moment you accelerate a little bit, the moment that you let off the accelerator, it would die again. And it'd do that for about 10 minutes before it would clear up and start running right again. Well, my theory is that what a lot of people don't know is that the fuel inside the tank is used to actually cool the fuel pump. And if you have if you let it get down low on fuel inside the tank, then it won't cool as well, and the pump will start to heat up, and eventually, running long enough, it'll overheat and it'll shut down. And I believe that's what was happening. I was down to about a quarter of a tank, or a little under half a tank. You should have it, in my opinion, you should have at least a half a tank at all times if you can, to help keep that pump cool. And it was down under that, and I believe that it started overheating, and it was shutting down. It would idle and run fine, but where it takes the most fuel is actually starting. So I think that's what it was. It couldn't provide enough fuel to keep it at idle. And after it finally cooled down a little bit, it started running better. That's when I was able to get it home. By the time I got it home here, which was about 30 miles away from where I was at, I pulled into the driveway, and as I was backing it into where it's sitting now, it died again, which means it heated up to the point where it ended up overheating and shutting down again. So at that point, I figured, I need to stop driving the van until I replace the pump. Otherwise, eventually, it's just going to one day stop altogether and not start back up again, and I'll have to have it towed. But anyway, that's kind of my rant at this point. I'll edit this and upload it, that kind of thing, and hopefully it'll help someone else in case they need to cut an access panel to their fuel pump rather than dropping the fuel tank, which on this thing is a real pain in the ass because of the running boards and everything else. Even with a floor jack underneath it, I don't think I could get enough room to get that tank down far enough to get the pump out of it. This is one of the best solutions. Cut a hole and then put a patch panel over the top of it, seal it down, put some screws in it. That way later on when the pump goes out again, which they're known to go out on these GMs quite often, you can just pull the panel off, replace it, put the panel back on, and you're ready to go again, rather than spending hours dropping that tank down. So anyway, hopefully this helps some people. Any questions, leave them in the comments, that kind of thing.